Alright everybody, Space Goats here for another, camera kind of messing up here. Another quick sort of video, I hope anyways. You guys seen the video that I did here a few days ago on the new, about made a mess, on the new EK Vector TUFF water block. Well, there's my graphics card. So today we are going to be installing this water block, and we're going to be installing the backplate for said water block. So hopefully everything goes well. I'm going to try to do this all in one take. I'm not going to stop and pause and do all that good stuff. So hopefully no issues. I do have my directions up on the monitor right here above my head. You guys can't see it, but y'all don't need to see it. So let's get started on this thing. Here's the back plate of our card, and according to our drawings, we're gonna have to start taking screws loose. So hopefully this won't take too long. I think the thing that's going to take more time than anything is more than likely going to be cutting out all the thermal pads and cleaning up the card. A little screw holder here, just a lid off of a Rubbermaid tote. They make pretty good screw holders. So looks like all these screws here, here, and there. And is that a washer? What is that? Kind of looks like a washer on the PCB. And we do have these screws with the little springs on them, like a little retention screw. I'm not sure how many of those I'm going to have to reuse, but I guess we'll find out. Separate heat sink. Huh, okay. We got the little baby screws here in the corners. I don't think we're going to have to reuse any of these screws on the water block, but we'll find out. That should be okay. Hopefully, don't have issues. I did a water block on a RX 5700 XT here a few months ago, and the water block come from Barrow. I ordered it from AliExpress, and these little plastic washers right here that they had inside of that other, for the other GPU block, was too big. So when I tightened it up, it actually hit one of these little capacitors that was next to a screw. You know, I don't know how well you can see it, kind of like this. You see with the washer looking there, they got the little cap sitting right here, and it broke the solder loose. I ended up having to break out my little digital camera microscope thing I got, and I ended up having to resolder that cap back on. Now, that's a hell of a little sticker right there. So that's just going to kind of scrape it off. Now, when I take these spring compression fittings off, I don't like to take off one screw off completely. I'll take them part of the way off and just kind of work my way around until it comes loose. It's just something that I've done being a mechanic. You know, you're torquing heads down on a car or doing something like that, you always torque it down in a pattern. And I always take stuff loose in a pattern. Alrighty, that should be all the screws we need to separate the cooler from the PCB. I'm gonna look at this back plate, make sure there's nothing attached to the back plate. Sometimes they'll have a like a tab or a screw here, or maybe on the back plate coming around attaching it to there. There are some fan connections right here. Fan and RGB connections, but we'll get those off in a minute. So if I real carefully apply a little bit of pressure, I can watch the pads separate real slow. And like that. Here's our fan connectors. So let me see if I can get my big old fenders in there somehow. There's one. Wow. They don't give you a whole lot of room. There we go. There's two. And there is our cooler. And there is the PCB. Now, we're going to have a whole bunch of new thermal pads. So all these pads are going to have to be cleaned off. I'll go ahead and clean them off the cooler. So all these are going to have to be cleaned off. I'll get some alcohol off here in a minute and get them taken care of. Oh yeah, these old pads are just falling apart. Dang, almost almost hard. Huh. And that one there just tore apart. I don't know. Almost like Play-Doh. Alrighty. Well, that's this. So let's get this over here kind of out of the way. That's the PCB. Now I bet this one ought to come off too. Real carefully. I'll make sure I got all the screws out of it. Yeah. See if we can do this real careful, like. There it goes. I just need to put a little more. Just try not to tear stuff up, guys. At some point in time, I want to put this all back together, you know. Come on. And I'd hate to hit a cap or something like that. Wow, that's some sticky ass little pads, aren't they? I don't like letting go for nothing. I don't know what brand or who makes these little gray pads, but they are pretty stout. All right, that was the heat sink that was on top of our memory modules. I do like the fact that you have two more memory modules here, like it's been, and it almost looks like it's been pre-balled with solder. So you got 10 gigabits of memory on this card, gigabytes of memory on this card, 10 gigs. Wow, I can't talk today. It looks like if you're a repair shop, hell, you may be able to add a couple more chips on there and give yourself 12 gigs on this card. Heard there's some rumors out of a TI model possibly coming out. of the 2080s or the 3080s and the 3070s, and they're supposed to have 12 gigs of memory if I remember the spec correctly when I saw it. Well, I'm gonna have to clean this stuff up. So let me go ahead and I'll go and pause this video real quick. Let me get all this stuff cleaned up and get my pads and stuff kind of laid out and figured out what we're gonna do, and I'll be right back with you guys. Okay guys, I got the front of this thing cleaned off. I tell you what, whatever thermal pads that ASUS is using on these boards is it's pretty stout stuff. It as you could tell when I took it apart, they didn't really separate cleanly. They just kind of split in half. So I got it all cleaned up. But what I also need to do is I need to install this back plate first, because all the screws for the back plate are actually underneath the water block. So I got to go ahead and take these screws off and separate this back plate. Now, problem's going to be is there's more thermal pads on these back plates, so hopefully there's no these ones come off a little cleaner. That way it's a little easier to put it on. And I gotta figure out the map for the screws on the back plate. I'm sure we can't use the same screws. I mean, because that would be a little too convenient if we use the same screws for the back plate as we do for the new back plate. That should be the last screw, I hope. Alright, let's see this back plate come off here. And we do got thermal pads. Got pads right around here, right on the bottom side of the memory. And there's pads on the back side of the VRMs and the power and the shunts. Oh, whoa, whoa, hey, you know what? Look at there. Those came off cleanly. Alright. Makes my job easier. And that's it. That is an ASUS TUFF 3080 PCB naked. Because naked's better, right? Pretty amazing how small that board actually is compared to the heat sink and fan and everything else that's going to go on it. So that's the board. And like I said, we got a water block right here. That's going to go on, and we got our back plate. So let me get the thermal pads all set up, and I'll be right back with you guys. Alright guys, we have all the thermal pads on the back plate done. So a little of the time consuming. I had to get my tiny scissors out to cut that thermal pad, because you know how tough it is to cut. So now I gotta find the screws, which is actually, you know what? I think those screws are gonna screw right into this, right into the GPU block. Sure does. So what I'm going to need to do now, go ahead and peel all my thermal pad. Actually, you know what? I'm wait to do that. I'll wait till we'll do the thermal pad at the end. We'll work on the thermal pad for the water block real quick and get that set up. I got a package over here of a bunch of thermal pad. Other thing is too, with my review of this water block, one of the things I was not necessarily happy with was this stupid cable that runs across the back of it. So when I get ready to put the water block on, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I mean, with the components and stuff on the PCB, is there enough room to kind of run this, you know, down and through here, where I can kind of hide it underneath the GPU when I install it? Or do I install it something like this and let it run across the back? I mean, this is, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this. A little frustrating, but I guess beggars can't be choosers, right? So let me go over to my install for the other one, and I should have, these should be all 1 mil thermal pads, and I got 4 of them, and I should have a bag of hardware and some thermal compound and a bag of hardware with our measuring card, a whole bunch of screws and little washers. So I will get back with you guys when I get done installing, or when I get done with all the thermal pads and I get the hardware figured out and stuff. I don't want to make this video 4 hours long just to try to install a water block, but I also want to make sure I get all the thermal pads across all the VRMs and all the power delivery stuff on the memory modules. I'll make sure I get it all laid out right for the best conductivity of heat. So I'll be right back with you guys here shortly. Alright guys, well, as you can see, all our thermal pads are installed. I did a fit check of the cable and what I'm going to do with it, so I got that set up. We have the thermal pad on the back plate installed, but that'll be installed last, since the screws do go all the way through the back plate and picks up a couple of screws on the water block. So these two can't do this one, and these two. So I pick up these 3 and the one over here in the corner. Everything else picks up through the board. So what we will do, I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but I'm going to carefully peel a cover off of this thermal pad. Wow. My big dumb fingers don't want to work today. There we go. Sometimes this stuff just catches right and you get the first shot. Other times it wants to fight you all the way. Times I wish they would make these water blocks and stuff machined where you didn't have to use any thermal pads, or you just use some paste or something like you would on the actual chipset or the GPU. But I'm sure there's some issue why they don't do it that way. People smarter than me put too much pressure on the board. Maybe not as good as contact, but I know it's easy to do. Just add a few more thousandths or a few more mils or whatever on your, when you're making these water blocks. Come on now. This is kind of the tedious part of this job here. I know a few people that just got done doing all this because of their mining cards. They go out and buy a whole bunch of used graphics cards and they repad and repaste them. So they spend hours and hours doing all this, one card at a time. But if you're doing a whole bunch of cards that are the same, you could go out and cut a whole bunch of pads all the same size, so you don't have an issue with you know, everything's already cut. You just cut a whole bunch of them the same size. You get that first card done, and you get a whole bunch of other cards. You almost assembly line it. Now, according to EK, they like the crisscross pattern. Oh, wow. Hope I didn't need all those screws. I just stuck in my hand. I just dropped a whole handful of screws all over the floor. Oops. Whoa. I wonder if that's enough. Probably too much. That little tube just squirted out a little quicker than I thought it was going to. Alrighty, boys and girls. Probably mostly boys. Let me get a couple of these screws out of the way. So they don't get caught on my foot. Alright. Let's see what happens. We got this sitting here. I'm going to turn this around this direction so that it's overhanging my workbench. Make sure I got this going on the right direction. Something like this. And still not far enough to get to the bench. Here we go. And plop. Something like that. Now, screw. Let's see, I can't do. Now EK does want you to use these little nylon washers. So we're installing the washers. And what I'm doing right now is just getting it kind of everything started. Nothing's real tight. Because what I want to do, and I guess that's all the screws I can pick up, I want to make sure everything's lined up best as possible with these holes. Hopefully my big head's not in the way. Alright, so just finger tight. That's all we need. Finger tight. Alright, now since that part's done, the next part will be the back plate. Now what I have not done is to see what screws are required for the back plate. They want 7mm screws. They want the longer screws, so that's not a problem. I had another bag. Was there longer ones in this bag? And that screws at 8. And this screw here is a 6. Well, none of those screws are going to work. So let's get the other bag out. And all right, go to 7. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these 7s. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Plastic washer. Get all these screws set up here real quick. Hopefully I don't drop all these other ones on the floor like I did the last batch. Alrighty. Let me get these out of the way. Because of all the projects that I've done, computer builds and everything else, and water block changes and stuff like this, I have several buckets around here and several containers just full of extra hardware, because there's always leftover hardware, from the motherboard boxes to cases to I'm going to change out water blocks to, you know, all kinds of stuff. So alright, let me pause this real quick. I'll be right back with you guys after I get the pads off. Alright, thermal pad plastic has been removed, so now it's time to install the back plate. And goes on like so. Let me make sure this thing is there we go. Just wasn't quite straight. Alrighty. And actually, I guess technically I don't need these washers. I don't know what I was thinking. So I stuck these washers on all these screws, taking this extra time to set it all up, and I didn't need to. One screw in. Like I said, normally when I do back plates, I do CPU brackets, anything like that, I don't tighten them all the way down. I get all the screws started first, started loose, maybe halfway in or so. From my years and experience as a mechanic, it's just something you learn, not to tighten everything up until you get all the screws in and get all the screws started. That way, if you have any issues, any problems, you're not doing a bunch of more work to take it all back apart. Or if it needs to be kind of wiggled around a little bit. Oh shit, dropping stuff. You can move it around, you can kind of wiggle it, you can do what you need to do to get it to actually fit properly. Put the lid back in my bottle of alcohol, and not the drinking kind. Alrighty, now all the screws are in place, so we'll tighten up this one, we'll tighten that one, and we'll give this a little bit, and give that one a little bit, and that one a little turn, that one's some snug in. And that's it. That's all she is. RTX 3080. TUFF water block installed. Now, something else that I will do that I like to do on any GPU or graphics card or anything like that, I will go in and double check all my pads. Make sure the thermal pads are contacting. See if they're any kind of squish or push out, anything like that. Looks like everything's good. The way the CPU is on these things, they're kind of set in like a little cavity, so it's kind of hard to get any squish. Kind of hard to see if you got any squish out, but there's enough thermal paste in there. I don't think that'll be a problem. Alrighty, well, she's installed, so I will. Oh, I don't know if I want to try to get this thing installed tomorrow or not. I did have this card running in my current daily driver, so I had to switch it out for a 5700. So this right here is going to go into my new rig that I've been working on, and I'll be pulling out the RTX 2080 Super. But like I said in the previous video, I'll have to reroute some water lines and make some new ones. So alright guys, well, like and subscribe, tell your friends, family, whoever. I'm still doing a computer giveaway once we get to 1,000 subscribers. I made a video on that system. It's a Core i5 9600K in a Inwin Chopin case. A little mini RTX system would be great for surfing the web and, you know, just basic stuff. It's not it doesn't have a graphics card or anything like that in it. So all right guys, well, I'll catch you in the next one.